Hey, spring has come to Denmark, so I am outside sitting on my patio and enjoying a little bit of shade under an umbrella. And while I'm doing that, I'm also looking over an email from New Zealand. So that was not expected and slightly unusual. Doesn't happen every day. I get mail from New Zealand, but this one was. And it was because there had been a bolt action tournament in New Zealand called Valleycon. So this is the results and the META of Valleycon. Let me just go and grab the PowerPoint here. Here we go. So, the results of Valleycon New Zealand. The event itself was 1100 points. You could get a free veteran sniper because there was one specialized mission where you really needed to have a sniper, so the TO actually said get that for free. And you could take generic reinforced platoons, you could take theater platoons, you could take tank platoons, although only single tank platoons, I think. So that is one of the really permissible events where you can do everything and you can do something really nasty with that setup, I think. At least I was immediately like, ooh, my World Open War list would do very well at that, right? So I was immediately thinking of how I could max the shit out of that. It had a 16 order dice cap, which I think is plenty for 1100 points. 12 players. The meta itself, because this is one of those where I'm like really interested in figuring out what happened, because I don't know anything about what people think in New Zealand about bold action. So the meta, I have no clue. This is the first time I've really had any like solid evidence for what people who go to a tournament in New Zealand are thinking. So the order dice count was between 10 and 16 with an average of 13.5, which I guess is low. For me, that's low. But maybe not massively so. It sort of reminds me a little bit about what I expect to see in America. There were 8 players who had theater platoons. There was 1 armored theater platoon, and there was 3 players who had brought generic reinforced platoons. That for me was a surprise. Not that people brought theater platoons, because I mean, yeah, there are some really good theater platoons, but that only 1 person took an armored theater platoon or an armored like a tank platoon. That was a surprise, because the standard wisdom right now, at least in Denmark, and I think for most of the big international tournaments, is that tank platoons are better than generic reinforced platoons, and they're better than theater platoons. Some theater platoons are really strong as well. So I had expected if people went there to win, they would take way more tank platoons, but that didn't happen. So maybe that's also maybe says something about how competitive they are in New Zealand and how much people will just go to an event just to have fun. 4 people had dual platoons, which again was a huge surprise, because if you can really spam out on all that's good, but people really didn't do that. So it was 8 single platoons, 4 dual platoons. So again, maybe that says something about New Zealand meta. I'll need to see more data before I can conclude anything there. But there are pointers, right? There are pointers. So, and I know this is weird because I have the results, right? As I'm speaking, I know the results. But when I got the email, I looked over the lists first before I looked at the results. So, this is my predictions, and you're going to have to trust me that I did this before I knew the results, because I was right. I thought that Aiden, with his 16 order dice leaf blower Western Desert Brits, he had like tons of HE. He would do well. I thought that Alistair had a 16 order dice faux tank Soviet cavalry platoon with a bunch of BA-20s. He would also do well. Brad had 14 order dice Italians assault, which, that's one of the things that we've been looking at, seeing if they'll make a splash somewhere. They haven't so far in the tournaments I've been following, but I thought perhaps this might be one of those where the Italians could actually become great. Then Hayden, 16 order dice German, barbecue and Death Star. That was a weird one. Very good on you, Hayden, for getting that much flamethrowers and I think it was a Panzer 4 or something. It was one of the heavier tanks in the list. I'm not sure that Death Stars work, but because he has so many order dice here, I think it actually does a little bit. And then Heath with his 16 order dice Japanese, veterans, and a bunch of Daka, including a Daka Steward, which normally I would not allow in generic reinforced platoons. As per fact, it's only in certain theaters that it is allowed in. But hey, if the TO allowed it, it's allowed. But that combination of Japanese veterans and Daka Steward, that's really strong. So I felt like these 5 guys could do well. And you'll notice there's one similarity here. Most of them are above 13 order dice. And these are the results. Aiden, Hayden, Brad, Alistair, and Heath came 1, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. This is the first time I've been absolutely right, and I couldn't actually prove it because I have the results at the same time as the list. That sucks. But I was right. I was completely right. Maybe that also says something about the distribution of competitive players versus non-competitive players at the event. I'm not sure, but look at this distribution here. We have Brits, Germans, Italians, Soviets, and Japanese as the top 5 nations. That's a good spread. But Germans, Americans, they go down in the listing. So that's, it doesn't really tell us that much about the nations and their power, but it does say something about, and a lot of these German lists were low on order dice. So maybe these players are not very competitive, maybe. Or at least the players who came to win, they brought as many order dice as they could within the limitations of the build that they wanted to go for. The main takeaways for me is that for the first time I can say something about the New Zealand meta, which is really cool. Was that easy to predict? Well, in that limited pool, yes, because there was a huge difference in the competitiveness of different lists. So I felt like that was easy to predict. Mechanized lists were not doing great. A bunch of the Germans and other, I think one of the Americans as well, had taken like half tracks and stuff, and they were not doing great. This is very much as expected, right? At this point in version 2, we know that mechanized lists are not going to be competitive enough. We also know that gear-heavy lists is a point sink. That's one of the traps that many rookies start out with, building lists and then just adding more gear because, I need more firepower in this unit. And they are not doing great as well. And all of the lists at the bottom were gear-heavy or mechanized. Armored fighting vehicles, though, very strong. So if you can build faux tank lists with 7+ transports, or like go and watch my videos on different units that are worth it, you'll see that I have some top 10 videos of vehicles and stuff. Some vehicles, if you can spam those, like the BA-10, the BA-20, the Stewards, the Bren carriers, airborne jeeps, early war motorcycles. There's a lot of vehicles that are really worth it, points for value here. And those armored fighting vehicles, once spammed, as they are here in the faux tank list, make a strong list quite often. And then assault, maybe not a thing in New Zealand, I'm not sure. because even the Italian assault list wasn't very assault heavy. Gurkhas, there were no Gurkhas, not really. So and they weren't limited. I mean, it's not a thing where you say, well, Gurkhas are not allowed. There was no comp in that regard. So maybe people are still skirmishing mostly in New Zealand and not assaulting to win games. I don't know. It's a very small sample yet, but it's getting there. Right. That was it for me today. Thank you to everyone who went to that tournament, and thank you for sending me the lists and the info. If you want to send me stuff, please do so in advance so I can try and predict stuff and maybe promote your event a little bit. Email is in the description. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.